welcome to the Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy, the free podcast for motivated teachers and school leaders who want to inspire their students and school community in literacy learning. Make sure you subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast player, and for more amazing literacy resources, check out the show notes provided with every episode.
Hi, I'm Sharon and I'm the host of A Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy. In every Toolkit episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. Firstly, we acknowledge and pay our respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Kaurna people to country, and we respect and value their past, present and ongoing connection to the land and cultural beliefs. And welcome, Phil.
Thanks, Sharon, and welcome back to part 3 of our podcast, Enjoy. I was just going to ask about what parents can do to help their children with comprehension in the early years.
Go on reading to their children.
Yep.
And I think sometimes they think that now the child started school, I should stop that and I should just listen to my child read. I think that if the school wants the parent to listen to the child read something as well as reading to them, that it would be really great if the parents let the child read silently before they read out loud to them, and that they focus more on talking about the text rather than perhaps even noticing mistakes in the way words are pronounced. You know, I think that the teacher should be really skilled at what to do about that. But at home with the parents, I'd like them to keep it both really enjoyable, but also a teaching thing would be asking more open-ended questions. If you want to ask a question like, what are you thinking about when you read that? Or what are you wondering? Or just discussing what it's about and noticing. Without becoming anything to do with thinking. And enjoying, but sort of the thinking, the understanding being so important for comprehension. What could a parent do?
But perhaps
I just think, what are you wondering? What are you thinking about? Very good open-ended questions.
But perhaps the first time they come across books, to just be there for the enjoyment of them and not have any teaching points about it. And
exactly, just like they would be doing before the children started school. And if they don't know about what books to choose, again, there are terrific websites. For example, some of the booksellers that specialise in children's books, like the Little Book Room, and you have
Peggy
in
Williams.
South Australia, Peggy Williams.
Where the Wild Things Are bookshop in Brisbane. There's another one.
Yep. And so getting on the mailing list of bookshops that have children's books is a good idea, because they're often telling you about what the good books are. If you're not near a bookshop, go to the library. Look, if you're really nowhere near any of these facilities, what you're going to be able to get online is going to be really important, isn't it? And fortunately, there are great websites. Who is it in New South Wales who's got Trevor Cairney, Cairney? He has a fantastic website about children's books that's just for parents.
Right.
And he's always letting you know what's being nominated for book awards, and then telling you about books for different interests. You can go back to all of his previous blogs and find out so much information about children's books. And then, of course, you want to be able to buy online because you're nowhere near a bookshop. So do that. But again, you can buy online from really good bookshops that we've mentioned, and it's good to develop a relationship with those good bookshops, because they'll be such a good friend to you in helping you. I've got a child who's interested in such and such, but won't read such and such, or I can't get them off these books into something else. Can you help me? You know, I've got a child who only likes crocodiles. What could I buy? You know, there's just so much help out there available for you.
In the schools we work in, there's one in the far north. We regularly take books up as part of our trip up there. And I know they can get them online, but it is great for them to
actually see them.
To see them, and books that we know have worked for us in the classrooms. And
exactly. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
I know this is available on one of your resources, the books to read aloud to beginning readers and
Yes.
young children before they start school,
Yes.
the most successful ones of those.
Yes.
And some of them, one of my goddaughters came this morning and I'd bought a book for her. She's got a grade 1 and a 4-year-old, 2 boys. And I didn't think they had Where the Wild Things Are.
Yep.
And she said, oh, yes, they've already got that book. They love it. So I said, that's okay. I'll put that aside for someone else's children to give to them. And as soon as someone has a baby, there are a pile of books from that list that are the first thing I go and buy, because I know that every child, no matter who it is going to love their parent reading those books. And, I have those parents, the baby will be 3 months old and they'll be contacting me saying, my child's favourite book is, and they want it read over and over, or, they want it in the cot. And they'll send me photographs of the first thing their kids do when they get out of bed in the mornings is go for a pile of books to read.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I just hope that when they start school, they're not going to be made to do activities that are going to help them learn to read, because I can tell you these kids can already read.
Yeah.
So, we need to find out as teachers what the kids have already got going for them.
Our literacy,
or they'll become bored.
That's right. Our literacy organisation, ALIA, have that wonderful program where they take books to newborns in hospitals.
They do.
Yeah.
I started that. I can't remember how long ago.
Did you?
We started doing it on International Literacy Day right around Australia.
Yeah.
And it was the ARA, then the Australian Reading Association.
Yeah.
And we started that every council went to hospitals and gave books to babies that were born on that day and a brochure to the parents about why they need to start reading to their babies.
Yeah.
And, I can't think how long ago that was. I think about 40 years ago. Yeah. So it's wonderful to know it's still happening.
If we could spend our millions of dollars in education on getting books into every classroom and then how to use those books wisely, that would be some of the best public...
Not only that, what governments should be doing about helping all parents have those books in their homes.
Yes.
Some parents can't afford them.
No.
They can borrow them from libraries if there's a library nearby.
Yep.
But, there's all sorts of things can get in the way and, or perhaps they can't get to the library. But there, again, you can get stuff online. YouTube's got some fantastic, places where there are authors reading aloud really great books to kids. But, I'm aware of the fact that some parents don't have access to the internet for several reasons. So none of the things we could take for granted and everything the government could do to help that to happen would help overcome any of the literacy problems that we might have.
Yes.
It's what makes a difference. Is it that versus making sure every, teacher gets 50 phonics lessons that they could easily work out themselves? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where will the money go to make the biggest difference?
Australia is a very smart country. I think we can spend our money, our public money, in much wiser directions sometimes. Yeah.
Yep. As long as our politicians don't get hoodwinked into other things.
Yep.
But let's go back to comprehension because I've realised I haven't spoken much about other strategies that are very common, like people like David Pearson and Nell Duke keep doing tremendous amount of research on, should we teach comprehension strategies, and if so, which ones would be the most useful. And I want to say at the outset, when teachers do this, they have to be very careful not to treat this teaching of strategies as an isolated thing. Like today we're going to learn predicting. The focus is on the strategy but without the context of the whole thing. So, and how it's not just teaching one strategy at a time, but whenever you are even focusing on one strategy, which I don't think is a problem, having a focus, that other strategies are going to come into play at the same time. And that's what readers do. You don't just predict without inferring, for example, or you don't just visualize and don't monitor what you're thinking about, what you're reading. So we need to build the children's knowledge about using these strategies but we need to make sure it's done within the context of the whole reading process. And we also need to find out about which kids may need more help with some of these strategies than others. And again, the only way we can find that out is when it's children's reading time, that I can sit with the child and I might simply say something like, so what were you picturing in your head when you read that? And some kids will actually say, huh? Like, I mean, I was supposed to have a picture in my head. And then I know that that will be a child who doesn't realise how much that helps your understanding, and how I might do some work with that child or a couple of other children who I find out need the same thing. But in the early grades, I really want to show the children right up front that this is something all skilled readers do. So in the foundation year, starting from the foundation year, I can make sure that children actually learn about how to do a number of these things. And what I'm talking about is, and they're all the things that good readers do. The good readers will usually have a purpose for what they read. And so it might be a purpose like, I enjoy reading, and I enjoy reading books by this author, and so I want to read more books by this author. And that's my purpose, to enjoy books by this author. And so the purposes can be a lot to do with enjoyment, or they could also be to find out, or they can be, I want to learn more about how to write science fiction, so I'm going to read a lot of science fiction. But the more that you have a particular purpose, even if it's enjoyment, or it might be, I belong to a book club, and in classrooms you can have literature groups, and I'm going to read this book because next Friday we're all going to discuss it together and talk about what we think about it, or about the writing, or about the author, or whatever. So I have a purpose, and I might even take some notes that will help me with the discussion I'm going to have with my group. And it's interesting how a number of kids reading the same book will want to get together and talk about it, just like we do. We go to a movie or we read a book and we want to find someone else to talk with them about it. You know, we don't ask questions of each other, but we just want to talk about it. So that's my purpose. Also, we do know that really competent readers are thinking about their reading even before they turn the first page and start to read the text. They're thinking about, what's this about? What kind of book is it? What do I already know that will help me understand and enjoy this book? And that can happen because you've read other books that are the same genre, other books that are on the same topic, or it's because you like this series and you want to read another one in the series, and therefore reading another one in the series you already know something about the characters and the sorts of people they are, or where they live, or what they do. And all of that prior knowledge, wherever it's coming from, background knowledge, world knowledge, knowledge about other books, about authors, all of that helps you predict. And that prediction helps you from the start. And as you get into what you're reading, what you read helps you predict more about what's coming next. But the important thing is you have to have evidence for those predictions. It can't just be, oh, I think this is going to be a book about cats because there's a cat on the front cover or something. And then you've got to keep looking for your evidence that might support your predictions or change your predictions. And that happens all the way through what you read. And I'll talk in a minute about how a consistent way to teach all of these strategies. We know that good readers sometimes like to think aloud about what they're reading. So I'm inclined to say to the kids during reading time, you need to be quiet rather than silent. Because sometimes readers like to even read aloud when they're very young, and that helps them read. So quiet reading rather than silent reading. I've talked about the inferring, and there are so many aspects of inferring that we want to show the kids that we'll be constantly teaching them just because of the material we're using, we'll notice another instance of a type of inferring. And, I'm looking at a book in front of me, I Want My Hat Back by John Klassen. I think there are 3 books about this bear and his hat. But when I start to read this book, then the first page is, for a start, inferring, I want my hat back. Who's I? And I predict it's the bear on the front cover, because who else would I be? But I need to confirm that. So I turn to the first page. There's the bear again. My hat is gone. I want it back. Who's who's I? Must be the bear, because there's that bear again, not some other thing being illustrated. Illustration helping me. Have you seen my hat? No, I haven't seen your hat. Oh, thank you anyway. Now, who's saying that? All of that. Is it the same person? Have you seen my hat? No, I haven't seen your hat. Okay, thank you anyway. What's going on? It's a conversation between 2 people or 2 creatures, isn't it? And in the illustration, there's the bear and the fox. Now, I really will not understand anything much about this book unless I am constantly inferring. And do you know what the author has even written? Have you seen my hat? And it's printed in black. And then, no, I haven't seen your hat is printed in brown. Why did the publisher do that? Why did the author want it written in 2 different colours? To help the reader to know this is a different person talking. So as I go on, am I going to get the same clues helping me to read? And yes, they are. So inferring comes up in so many different ways. If I'm reading a non-fiction book and I turn to the first page and it's actually got a table of contents, and I see a chapter with a heading, What Whales Eat, I can infer that chapter is going to be about what whales eat. But another chapter that has a heading, Whales are becoming extinct, then I can infer that chapter is going to be about what's perhaps attacking whales, or is a problem for whales that there's now less of them than there used to be. But this is even really important in nonfiction, where the illustrative matter really is so important. The text says, whales eat very tiny creatures. And then I look at the illustration, and it has an illustration which is labelled krill. And I only know what krill is because I can see what it looks like in the illustrations. The text said, whales eat very tiny creatures, and I think this is just a particular whale, it would be. But what are those tiny creatures? If the illustration has got something drawn with a label saying krill, then I can infer that these whales eat krill. So the inferences that go on in nonfiction between the print and the illustrative matter with labels and captions is absolutely essential to the comprehension of this text. So I purposely watch out for nonfiction texts with very young children, with not a lot of print, but illustrative material that is going to help them learn. Like when I was reading to you before the tarantula book, and it says tarantulas have long fangs, there's a photograph of just one part of the tarantula, the front part, and there's a label to something called fangs. So I'm learning that this is the part called fangs, and this is what they look like. The text did not tell me as much as I can see in the illustration. Tarantulas have poison in their fangs, and there's another picture with a label to the part where the poison is. So the illustration is teaching me more, but I'm inferring, because the text was about such and such, that must be what I can learn from the illustration. So, and the last page of that is a beauty for inferring. It's a spider on a dinner plate. And I know it's a dinner plate because beside it, one side there's a fork, the other side is a knife. And here's this spider on a plate that's as big as the knife and fork each side of it. The text says, Tarantulas are the biggest spiders in the world. Now, the author didn't say this, but how big can a tarantula be? As big as a dinner plate. So that's an inference because the illustration shows the spider sitting on a dinner plate. Just keep watching for those opportunities from the beginning of foundation right through every year level of school. Now, I've talked a little bit about this, but the actual teaching children to use text structures and features will help their comprehension. And what I mean by that is, let's say it's going to be that book about making scones, then I know that the text is going to have many different features than if it's a story. And it might be a story about how a girl made scones one day for her mum's birthday. But if this is a how-to book, then I'm going to find different kinds of text structures and different layout. And like it starts, utensils needed for cooking scones. And there's a picture of each utensil with a label. Now, by me knowing that this is the normal way that how-to informational texts are written, then it's much easier for me to use that knowledge then to sort of predict the type of text and what this is going to be about and how it will work, and that aids my comprehension. So each type of text has its own text structure and features like labels or whatever, so we can teach children how to use those. I've just got a couple more that are worth sharing with you. Questioning by the reader. So not the type of question the teacher asks at the end, but it's sort of like the wonderings that the reader has. Like perhaps it's even something like the story about the boy on Saturday mornings helping. Oh, I wonder why that boy thinks he's helping but doesn't realise that he isn't. Or I wonder why this bear's looking for its hat. So I wonder why the bear keeps asking different people or different creatures. So there are sort of questions, the wonderings you have as you start to read. And like when I start to read a novel, my questions are, where's this taking place? Who's the main character? What's happened to them? When do I think this story was set? And I'm looking for answers to those questions, and therefore I notice them more easily when I'm reading, and I understand the book easier. But especially when it's a story, I even know that it's going to have some features, like stories have a main character or characters. They have a setting, where and when it took place. They have some sort of plot, the storyline. If it was a fable, it will have a moral. So the questions tend to be around the sorts of things that I know about different kinds of texts. But I definitely notice that I have questions. And often I'll even then turn to the blurb if it's on the back cover and try to get those questions answered quickly so that I can sort of go into the book understanding more about what's going to happen. So it's not the questions the teacher asks, it's the questions that the reader asks themselves while they're reading. Then this monitoring, clarifying and fixing up I've already spoken to about. And, we really do need to make sure that kids realise that they do need to monitor their reading. If it doesn't make sense, they need to stop and figure out what it should be about and doing something about fixing up their misunderstandings. That's what good readers do. It's important to know that if it's not making sense, then you stop and you do something and fix it up before you go on. I'm sure a lot of you have had kids who just do not do that. They come to words they don't know and they just skip them and read on, and they just keep reading and never monitoring whether what they're saying makes sense. They're just saying words and they haven't got a clue what it's about. The more they go on, the more they lose it. We need to teach them to self-correct and how to do that it might require rereading. It might require finding out the meaning of a word. It might require understanding the sentence structure. It might require some help from someone else because you can't work out what's going on. But that it's not okay to just say words and not understand what's going on. One of the things that does help us a lot, that's another comprehension strategy I've already mentioned, and that is visualising or forming a visual representation, which is sort of like a diagram of what we're reading, which with a story might be a story map. Or with non-fiction, we might sort of form these little tables in our head with headings and listings under them. So we might do those things or just simply visualise, picture what's happening, like watching a movie. And when you're doing that, you might have a different movie to somebody else, but you've got your movie helping you understand what's going on. And if kids are not doing that, we need to let them know that that's something a good reader does. Good readers also summarise, and this is probably the hardest of all. And first of all, kids can learn how to retell, and that's an important strategy to be able to teach the youngest readers to retell what has happened, either in a non-fiction text or a fiction, retelling the story. And they would need to know, the main character and what's happened to that main character in order to do that. But summarising, which is sort of like a summary, might just be one sentence, and it might be the moral of the story, or you've learned that not all children are bad, or something like that. So summarising's much more complex, and I find it needs a lot more demonstration than many of the other strategies in order for kids to know how to do it. And that summarising a story will be very different to summarising something that's non-fiction. So I know all of those strategies, ones that the researchers, who are the ones keeping us up to date with the science of reading, will say that if kids are taught how to use those strategies, it will improve their comprehension. But now, how do you teach them? And for all of them, the basic things are demonstrating, explicitly demonstrate each step that you take, and then the children having a go with you, and then the children having a go by themselves, and then getting feedback from you about how they're going with that. So in the article that you'll get with this podcast, there's a lot more detail about each of those steps, but it's definitely explicit demonstration, children having a go with you, doing by themselves, getting feedback. And do you know what I find? I need to even be as explicit as saying, you can now use that in your own reading. Now that you know how to do that, whenever you read, you could see whether that works to have a go at that. So that it's not just we're learning how to do this just for the sake of learning how to do it, but we're learning how to do it so you can apply it to whatever you read. And again, those same strategies can be retaught right through the school years, and what will change is the complexity of the text and the variety of instances in which such a strategy could be used.
So the teaching pedagogy is very important to help the children to take this on board.
That's right.
Yep.
And again, I'm going to have to think this through over a year, aren't I?
Yep.
Because I've got a number of strategies. I'm not going to deal with them all in the one day, the 1 week, and even the one term. But I know that over the year, I'm going to make sure that the children learn about how to use each of those strategies because they will help their comprehension. And remember before I said, well, let's start with inferring because they'll need it so much. And yet I think it's more likely that teachers tend to start with predicting because it's so easy. And look, if that's where you want to start because it's an easier thing to teach, for heaven's sake, do so. But also think about how much the children and any reader is going to use inferring, and particularly the use of pronouns and working out who they refer to. They're going to help them with lots and lots of texts. And I know predicting will too, but just think about every time you pick up a text, what will the kids need to be able to do to comprehend this? And I'll bet inferencing, making an inference comes up a lot.
Thanks so much, Di, for today. Have you got any final comments about comprehension in the early years?
Yes, I do. Number one, make sure you include it as much as learning about word identification, because it's absolutely essential. If someone tells you not to do it, don't take any notice of them, because the researchers, the science of reading researchers, are saying, not just because I'm saying it, but you must teach comprehension. Otherwise, the children will not learn to be successful readers. B, that it can be done right from the start of school, and so you should. What will affect that will be the material you choose for your children as read alouds and what they're going to read themselves. It will be dramatically affected by how much you build up their world knowledge, and that's going to take a long time over all of their years at school. And that in the main, okay, there's a lot to comprehension. I've gone through a lot of information that we need as teachers. Start with something that you feel comfortable starting with and do it well. And over the year, you're going to have a go at a number of other things that you'll keep adding to your repertoire. And when you feel comfortable with something, try something else. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean that right at the outset, right from the start of the year, the kids will be getting everything that could help them. But if you're doing good work with them, that's better than doing no work or bad work. So that anything that you do well that we've talked about today is going to be really helpful for them. And finally, I think if you just take a common sense approach and thinking, I'm going to use this book for shared reading, or I'm going to read it aloud, what is there in this book or this text of some kind that the children will need to know about that will help them to understand what they're reading? And if you take that approach, you'll realise that this might be the first time you do some work on pronouns, but then they'll be starting to notice that themselves, and you'll find many other opportunities to do that. So that if I look at a book knowing, and I might just have headings in my mind, which would be sentence structure, vocabulary, use of pronouns, knowledge of topic, choose a number of those headings, comprehension strategies, then as I'm looking at the book, I can think, which of those would I need to make sure that I deal with today? Otherwise, the children will not understand what I'm reading to them or what we're reading together in shared reading. And most of all, enjoy it. Enjoy the reading aloud. Choose material that you love, that the children love and want again and again, and have a go. Keep reading about what comprehension teaching is about. Listen to podcasts, listen to webcasts that are online. Discuss it with your colleagues and work at it together. Ignore incorrect information, like you shouldn't teach comprehension until grade 3. Okay?
And connect your writing with your reading?
Oh, yes, Phil, thank you for saying that. It would be just drastic if you worked so much on reading that you didn't equally work on the children's writing, whether it's to do with word recognition or comprehension. It's going to be so effective to work on both of them together and just as much. And that in both instances, choice of reading by the children and choice of topic by the children as writers are going to be a very important part of this. So they're my main go away, think about most effective things for the teacher to be doing. But just like I've been rereading, re-listening, reviewing anything that I can about comprehension, and I've been at this for 56 years. So feel comfortable about doing that yourself and just gradually getting better at it. It's the same learning for us, isn't it? You need to see some demonstrations. Perhaps it might be just in what you're reading or hearing about, and then you need to have a go. If you've got someone to give you feedback, then that's really fantastic. And that's where, some other teacher and you might be joining in this learning together. Or as a school, what a great thing for a principal to be thinking about, how can my whole school learn more about how to teach comprehension effectively, so that you've got each other to talk about what you're doing, perhaps coming and observing and giving you feedback and vice versa, and listening to what your children are doing and saying, because you will learn so much from them as well.
And you're not...
They love using those big words, by the way.
Yeah.
They love to talk about such things as, I'm predicting this before I read because that will help me comprehend what I'm reading. I mean, they're quite capable of very sophisticated language.
Yep.
So the more you use it, the more they will,
Yep.
and the more they'll understand.
Yep. Thank you so much, Di, for today. I think we've got this valuable podcast people can go back on to highlight any area that they'd like to learn more about, but also your article that you've written, and all the other things that you're going to give us for the show notes. People will be able to go to those things.
Yep. Good luck and enjoy it. Reading's such a pleasurable thing,
Yep.
So make sure that's what your children get out of it the most.
Thanks so much, Di, and thank you, everyone, and bye for now.
Thanks, Phil. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. To make sure you don't miss any literacy learning tips and insights, please subscribe to our show on your favourite podcast player. At Q Learning, our literacy specialists draw on over 30 years of teaching and international consulting experience to deliver world-class learning solutions. We equip, empower and support teachers to become their authentic selves. To find out about upcoming webinars and about how Q can help you and your school, visit qlearning.com.au. And you can get even more amazing teaching resources right now at teachific.com.au. Stay tuned.